All right. Hi there. This is a new streaming video, and I had a little bit of difficulty this morning getting the streaming going. It accidentally started streaming. It really freaked me out. But I think I have it under control, and I will delete out that one that just shows my logo for a few minutes. Some of you might have been tuned in to that. I apologize if so. As usual, you are free to chime in on chat, which I shall put on my Vim window, which, as part of the message you guys and girls are starting to see, is a critical central part of what I have to tell you. A full screen Unix/Linux terminal is a starting point in all things. So this is going to be very similar to a video that I had done a few days ago in preparation for the French drop coin magic trick, which will probably take me 5 minutes to do. Easier than any of these thinking through things videos. It's the easiest stuff to do that is hardest for me, the working up to it. There's a lot of thought work, so that'll still be coming. I meant to do it right after that other video, but life and stuff. And I guess the detail and the subtlety matters. How could that video where I took off my finger be my, my second million view on its way to 2 million views? I hardly even thought about it. I just spontaneously did it. So now thinking about it slows me down. That's a big lesson in that. So like the video that was leading up to that, this is going to be a thinking through my process sort of video. And I actually have the headline for it now, so I can do @H. I messed that up. @H does my headline, and it's the Great Integrated Life. Sometimes you don't know what a subject is until after you've done your writing. You sort of tease it out of yourself. If you aren't familiar with the book, my first book recommendation is The Artist's Way. I should probably put a tab up there. I did not number my tabs, as I didn't even mention what tabs I was going to be using. So instead of going through this rabbit who I thought was so important, I moved it to the top of this journal. So you'll see it every time I start a journal entry in mikelev.in. And so even though I like Jupyter on screen too, see, these are my 7 virtual desktops I always have open, it does kind of interfere with the smooth flow to the tabs I want to show you in the browser. I just want the simple left-right kind of thing going on there so that I can move across these. And Camp Watonka, that was the thumbnail that I start out on. So we'll get to that soon enough. Wow, it's still only 6:45 a.m. The early bird really does get the worm. Get a 7 a.m. live cast in. Go set it up so people know it's coming, right? Anyone there? Growing a backbone, I am. Growing a backbone, I am. Life is one giant integrated thing. When I was standing in an elevator in Manhattan for one of my marketing agency jobs, I forget which at this point, I heard one of the flocking millennials who was in the elevator with me, a group of millennials. I was standing there on my own, not with a group. So I heard one of those millennials say in a contemptuous tone to a co-millennial, "Such and such person views life as one big integrated thing with no separation between work and personal. Can you believe that?" And I thought to myself, yes, I can. And, I didn't say anything, but I thought to myself, who are these pictures to pigeonhole a soul into, you are this here, but you are that there? Didn't Voldemort's failed strategy of slicing and dicing his soul into separate Horcruxes in the story Harry Potter teach you anything? Horcruxes. I pronounced it wrong. It's Horcrux. So, Voldemort sliced and diced his soul, subdivided and subdivided it again, each time putting it into a product of the material world. Ugh. I kept my mouth shut, of course. I am not these pishers' parents. If their mommies and daddies didn't teach them what you do is what you love, and what you love is what you do, then it's not up to me. And you make your own bed and you sleep in it. So that got me thinking beds, right? Beds, chairs, keyboards, your car, text editors. These are seemingly small things, small decisions in life. What bed should I sleep in? What chair should I sit in? What keyboard should I use while typing? What car should I drive? What editor should I use for text? But they have a profound impact on your life. They are where you live, and they're given to little thought. You live in these things more than in anything else in life. And if you're not a tech person like me, you can probably replace keyboards and text editors with whatever the tools of your trade are. You do have a trade, right? A craft you can feel good about having mastered, something of value where you can trade your time or your product for economic, power without having to rely on the handouts and charity of others. It's good for your self-esteem. No? You don't consider yourself expert at anything, able to trade skills or product for goods? Well, I think that's a problem because it's closely tied to self-image. And what I'm not saying is that a man is what a man does. I know that was an issue not long ago. But rather, we are products. We are occupants of the material world. And how you weave matter into the stuff of life matters. I say it again. How you weave matter into the stuff of life matters. And you have to do it. The Maslow hierarchy of needs with food, clothing, and shelter at the bottom, you can't ignore that. Born an infant without anything you can do for yourself in life, you grow up and you start to take care of your needs at the bottom. It shifts from your parents doing it for you doing it for yourself. That's becoming an adult. So let's take some examples. Most of us drive, right? Maybe you're tuning in and you're younger, but I looked at my demographics. Most of you are 18 through 50. So most of you drive, or maybe you hope to someday if you're younger than that. If nothing else, being a driver is an easy way to turn everyday skills attainable to anyone into economic product. Attainable to anyone, you push back. Well, driving was once the privilege of the rich, just like books and literacy. But like books and literacy, driving is now one of the great, easily obtainable options of the in need. Driving is just like literacy. You're not born with it, and you have to work for it. But most people can and do. It's not a big deal. Well, there are still some who don't, and that is due to the real modern pandemic, the actual pandemic of our time, which is anxiety, the actual blocker of driving. You have to overcome crippling anxiety to drive. Losing control of yourself like some non-human, while driving is just not an option. So, just like how reading for pleasure opens doors for you in life by allowing you to run the vicarious experience of others in your head, without the same risks they took in life to acquire those experiences, driving similarly helps evolve you, your personal being, your soul, into being more human by giving you access to worlds previously unavailable. Public transportation can't get you everywhere. And in fact, the trials of using public transportation to zero in on where you want to go is good. It's good exercise. I highly recommend it, but it is not the same. If you're waiting for self-driving cars, you're waiting for vicarious parents, replacements to your actual parents, to step into your life and let you remain some sort of adult child. Is that what you want for yourself? How can I communicate such depth of life experience in one quick elevator pitch? That person you feel contemptuous, that person who feels contemptuous of viewing life as one big integrated world, that person you feel contemptuous of, who views life as one big integrated thing, is worlds wiser than you, says I in my mind silently to that millennial, the upwardly mobile Manhattanite. That T.S. Eliot addresses so succinctly in Hollow Men. Oh, poets, yeah, they can do a better job than expressing it than I can. Let me be as humble as the narcissist I am accused of being sometimes. I am an unpoetic dumbass. I am 51 years old and greatly unaccomplished by the measures of the very green arrow yangs I covet. But so what? I do not have expectations of myself to be some sort of the greatest of all possible wizards that I covet. I am not one of them. I am not Martin Richards, the inventor of the BCPL language that gave rise to our modern world. That is what the C language was based on. The C language is often attributed to Dennis Ritchie as a great innovation that brought about the digital revolution. It enabled Unix, which enabled the internet, which enabled Linux, which enabled the web, which enabled, freedom of expression worldwide, But now it was Martin Richards from the UK who created BCPL. He had the innovations, the tools to make tools, to make tools, to make tools, the greatest of all wizards, perhaps one of the greatest of our time and under-recognized. But all that stuff didn't come from nowhere. All the stuff that goes into Unix came from somewhere. I often attribute it to Fernando Corbato, but honestly, people like Douglas McIlroy, who championed inter-process communication and piping data between different programs in a computer. These are the people who laid the foundation for what became our modern digital age. The digital revolution is because of people like Martin Richards and Douglas McIlroy, who we've never heard of, right? More so than it is the more famous ones like Kenneth Thompson. We'll get to him, but Fernando Corbato is the one who invented time sharing on computer, invented Multics, which Unix was based on. So Kenneth Thompson adapted a combination of Douglas McIlroy's and others like him, their concepts. Bell Labs hired a lot of those people. So Kenneth Thompson combined the work of the folks at Bell Labs with the work of Fernando Corbato and funneled all that brilliance into Unix. Again, tools to make tools to make tools to make tools. The greatest of all wizards, who I would only dream to even, use their tools well, right? My goals in life, my humble goals, is to be an expert user of the types of tools that these people have made. More wizards. Let me talk about more wizards. Richard Matthew Stallman took the work of Kenneth Thompson and liberated these ideas to the world. The best computer science ideas going in operating systems said, oh, the world deserves this. Here you go. If it's bogged down with intellectual property rights because Bell Labs, Novell, IBM, SCO, all these folks are like, you can't have Unix, that's mine. Well, Richard Matthew Stallman is the one that you have to thank for letting Unix free like a butterfly. If you love something, let it free. Linus Torvalds, of course, the other famous one, right? There's only two famous names, and even partially at that, Kenneth Thompson, Linus Torvalds. Linus Torvalds said, I've got this great way to get a system booted, but I don't have the Unix commands. RMS said, I've got the Unix commands, but I don't have a booted system to run it on. Two great tastes that taste great together. The peanut butter and the chocolate came together to create GNU Linux. GNU Linux, my friends. Richard Matthew Stallman plus Linus Torvalds equals the enabler of the web. Not so much the enabler of the internet that came before with some of the names above it, but the enablers of the web. Maybe I should put Vint Cerf. Vint Cerf and Tim Berners-Lee certainly are honorable mentions here, right? So they came after Ken Thompson because in the stack, right, there's Vint Cerf and Tim Berners-Lee. They should probably go beneath Stallman and before Linus Torvalds. And they are the connectors of computers and spreaders of information. Let's just say the connectors and spreaders of information, of ideas and information. That'll do it. Oh, a line wrap. I almost got away without a line wrap. It's okay. I can fake it. Shift J. Linus Torvalds, obviously. So some other strange ones, right? Because all this is basically on the stack that I admire so much, the stack of Linux, Python, Vim, and Git. And it's not really even a stack. It's a tool. It's a set of tools. Because things don't execute necessarily on Vim as if it were some execution engine stack, nor on Git. But for Python, right? So everything above here has been talking mostly about Unix and Linux. But when we get down to here, we get to the wizards on who Guido van Rossum's work is based. And that is the ABC programming language. And it's quite unclear who that is, whether that's Leo Gertz, Lambert Mertens, or Stephen Pemberton. I've got some research to do. Who brought the seminal ideas of Python to the world? That you don't need curly brackets. You don't need curly braces for a modern language. You just don't need it. Indents can matter. White space can matter. Not in all cases, but where it should, it should. The places where everyone is indenting to imply hierarchy of their program and program flow anyway, they're doing it anyway. You're all controlling your white space and your indents to imply how code blocks are grouped. You're doing it anyway. If you're doing it anyway, make it count. There's some important shaping of the modern world, casting aside all assumptions that's happening here. Let's see if you folks are with me. Yeah, coming and going. This stuff I've learned basically lies. There's more people there than this says. And, okay. So I talked about the Horcrux. Oh, here's a picture of Douglas McIlroy, one of the ones who was actually a shaper of the things that are the Unix way, right? The Unix way. What is the Unix principle? Each program should do one thing well. To do a new job, build a fresh rather than complicate old programs by adding new features. Expect the output of every program to become the input of another, as of yet unknown program. We should see who that is. We can drill down on this later. Maybe you folks can. Oh, that's Brian Kernighan. He created the C book. So whereas this guy, Dennis Ritchie, created the C programming language, Dennis worked with Brian here to create another one of the seminal books of tech, which is the C programming language. In fact, if we go the C book, it's probably going to be the main one that comes up with a picture there. That's it. This is the book that was written in combination between Dennis Ritchie and I always forget his last name. I got to get it down, but Kernighan, Brian Kernighan. And the ABC programming language I was talking about, you can see here where I copied those three names. I wish it was more detailed about who did what so we can credit the work on which the great wizard Guido van Rossum did his work, right? So he liberated the concepts from the ABC programming language. By the way, I did not necessarily have to wait for Python. Somewhere in the 90s, probably circa 1991, I would guess, big year for all this stuff, I received the ABC programming language on Fred Fish disk, Fred Fish public domain, just in case you don't know what I'm talking about. Free and open source software, before free and open source software, was public domain software. And let's see what that came out on. And I'm pretty sure it was a Fred Fish disk. I might be wrong, but I don't think so. ABC programming language, Fred Fish, which is an Amiga public domain distribution thing. It's going to be tough. I'm not going to make you suffer through such an obscure search, but I had the ABC programming language in my hand. Again, thanks to Tony Antonuccio, or it might have been Ed Gee, the two great, or Jerry Hedden, Tony Antonuccio, and Ed Gee, the three great disk distributors of the Philadelphia Amiga user group, I guess. Thanks to Philadelphia Amiga users group. Plural possessive always. Okay, so other wizards. I love Vim, right? See, Linux, Python, Vim, and Git. When we get up to Vim, the temptation is to credit Bill Joy. And it's true. Bill Joy not only wrote the EX editor on which his VI editor was based, so Bill Joy wrote this, which was based on this, both by him, but his work was based on a program called QED, which was written by Butler Lampson and L. Peter Deutsch. They developed the first line editor that kicked off the lineage of line editors that led to ED, that led to EX, that led to VI, that led to Vim, that led to all these other things. Well, VI led to NeoVim and NVim. There's a whole bunch of them. And it's embedded in other things. If you use VS Code, there's Vim mode in VS Code. If you use Emacs, there's evil mode with the VI in the middle of the word evil. So moving on quickly, Bill Joy, of course, turned that into the VI editor that's built into everything now. If you have a one floppy disk distribution of a bootable operating system, chances are there's VI on there as a text editor so that it's not static, so it's not in a static state. So if you load it into memory, because a one disk operating system easily loads into your running RAM, so it becomes involatile, it can't get a virus. This is the way Tiny Core Linux runs, right? If you're interested in actually running an operating system that works this way, you should check out Tiny Core Linux. It is a nomadic. See, 12 megabytes fits on a keychain for sure. Not even a big keychain, a small USB keychain from the olden days. And let's see if they still talk about it as nomadic. Yeah, there it is. Oh, and they want to do a graphical booting from CD-ROM, pen drive, or frugally from a hard drive. Okay, so if you're talking about kooky versions of Linux that are worth looking at, this evolved out of Tiny Core Linux, another popular Tiny Linux. But the guy who wrote this, Robert Shingledecker, who I believe was responsible for one of the first municipal installations of Linux in the United States, broke off. He schismed off. The technical guy who did DSL, Damn Small Linux, said, hey, I got better ideas. I want to do this my way. So when he broke off to do it his way, his goal, right? There's other people, but honestly, this is Robert Shingledecker's creation. My goal is the creation of a nomadic, ultra-small graphical desktop operating system. So it's not even just the tech stuff I advocate. He's saying, yeah, do it graphics. Capable of booting from CD-ROM, pen drive, or frugally from a hard drive. This boots extremely fast and is able to support additional applications and hardware of the user's choice. While Tiny Core always resides in RAM, as I was saying, additional applications extensions can either reside in RAM or be mounted from a persistent storage device or installed into a, so you get the idea, right? The operating system itself resides in RAM. And when you have something like that, you can also have a text editor thrown in just kind of for free because it's part of, these things are often based on BusyBox Unix, BusyBox Linux, a very scaled down version of the command set. The same command set that Richard Matthew Stallman made, right? Because this guy is responsible for saying, hey, Unix is mostly these 30 or 40 commands, whatever they are. The things you know as CD and ls, right? When I open another terminal, when I go over here, double click one of these, keyboard shortcut might be broken. And if I do ls, right, these things are the commands of the Linux command set. pwd for print working directory. See that? All right. So, back to the point. And finally, Bram Moliner, who said, hey, VI is great, but again, I'm another Amiga user who feels that this should be brought to the rest of the world. So Bram Moliner recognized Bill Joy's brilliant work on VI, and kept it alive as Vim. Developed in 1988. I always say 1991, but he did it in 1988, and it only didn't get distributed widely until Fred Fish number, I know this one because it was big, 591 in 1991. Again, I had it in my hands. Alternative histories would have been me embracing it and saying, hey, this is good stuff. I'm gonna use this. Time to check if anyone's there. Not really, but time to also check if I'm broadcasting audio. I'm a little bit paranoid about that. Yep, there's all my audios. There I am talking. Hey, there's the green screen behind me. I experiment sometimes with, different backgrounds. I leave my closet door open. Yeah, it's an open closet. Lots of symbology here, right? All right. And then finally, Larry McVoy, who created the original distributed version control system, which a certain Git subsequently copied and brought to the world. Of course, that other Git I am talking about is Linus Torvalds. Again, whereas Linus Torvalds copied the work of Kenneth Thompson to make Linux from Unix, Linus Torvalds copied the work of Larry McVoy, who created the original distributed version control system. Distributed version control system. Does that make Linus nothing but a copycat? No. Caps lock. Google caps lock has some purpose. Implementation matters. Nuance and subtlety matter. The personalities behind things matter. The personalities behind things matter. Boy, the stuff I want to say here. Linux is greatly as popular as it is because Linus stepped up to defend it here and there and here and there. And it's the implementation that you all know you have today. Linux is the implementation you all know you have today because of Linus being so vocal, such a git, and such a strong personality. He seems very soft-spoken. He seems, very easygoing, but he's the kind of person, if you had some sort of focal lens that you could turn and actually see the inside soul. You know how, who was it? It was, which bad guy? The bad guy from one of the Disney movies, one of the evil, magic users, transformed herself into a giant black dragon. If you were to turn that focal lens on Linus Torvalds, you would see that giant dragon of his soul underneath that soft-spoken, mild-mannered personality. And you can see it here and there. He'll flip the bird at a camera, knowing it's going to be picked up by the press and carried on every Slashdot-like site in the world, and he still does it. All right, so one additional unplanned discussion, because you need to see some of these historic discussions that have taken place, because Linux is the implementation of a Unix operating system you're probably going to be using soon that you know about. And the other one, and I'm not even going to Google the name of the other one, I'm going to Google Linus Torvalds versus Andrew Tannenbaum. B-A-U-N. Linus Torvalds versus Andrew Tannenbaum. The Tannenbaum-Torvalds debate. These two folks, man. If you follow my lead and do what I say, which is WSL install and this is on Windows 11 under a PowerShell with admin rights. So on Windows 11 on a PowerShell with admin rights, you type this and you get the type of environment I have. See, you get this kind of type in text interface. That's what that leads to. You can also run Linux graphical apps. All right, we'll get to that, but that's not the point. Except for Jupyter Desktop. That is the point. I can't wait to get to that. But in due time, if you do this, if you follow my advice and do this, you are following in the footsteps of this guy here, Linus Torvalds. And you will have a Unix operating system on your Windows PC that you know about. This guy here, is it Andrew? Yeah, Andrew Tannenbaum. Thank goodness I'm getting some of these names right. He is responsible for the Unix operating system on your PC that you do not know about. You think I'm kidding? You're running Unix right now. You don't know you're running Unix, but you're running Unix. Intel Management Engine? What is the Intel Management Engine? That's Intel's own talk about it. Of course, they're pushing out a page because they have to step in and intermediate you learning about the fact behind the autonomous subsystem that has been incorporated into virtually all of Intel's processors, chipsets since 2008. The Intel Management Engine always runs as long as the motherboard is receiving power. All right, it's a Wikipedia page, right? Not the most authoritative, but this page would not stand if this were not true. Intel could not get this taken down, right? If they wanted to. The power of Wikipedia and objective truth, a preponderance of evidence, is what keeps this kind of stuff up. Intel Management Engine runs as long as the motherboard is receiving power, even when the computer is turned off. The Intel Management Engine is an attractive target for hackers since it has top-level access to all devices and completely bypasses the operating system. Intel's main competitor, AMD, has incorporated the equivalent. It's a backdoor, folks, on all your Intel and AMD hardware. Okay. I'll jump to it. It's Unix. It runs the Unix operating system. The Unix operating system is the small version of Unix created by Andrew Tannenbaum that advocates a microkernel design rather than a monolithic kernel design. Andrew Tannenbaum, in this historic debate, let's see, it's a 19-something debate, early 90s perspectives. The debate opened up on January 29th, 1992, when Tannenbaum first posted his criticism of the Linux kernel to Comp OS Minix, noting how monolithic design was detrimental to its abilities. 1992, 2002, 2022. 20 years later, you got clowns to the left of you, jokers to the right. Here I am stuck in the middle with you. Your computer is always running Unix, whether it's off, whether you power it off and close it, it is running an active version of Unix with a full network stack reachable by Intel and others. Whether you know it or not, whether you want to do anything about it or not, because you need some pretty hefty tech skills to stop this. And even in order to understand the kind of Nix type stuff that it's based on, because you're not going to be getting Minix running on your system and doing anything useful with it. You got to get Linux running on your system to kind of get anything useful running with it. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Well, I'll get to it below. Nix is literacy. Nix is literacy. I don't have to rewrite it over and over. See, these are the brilliant wizards. There are tons of others not credited here. The MIT crowd and the Lisp lineage of technology, who are not part of the Unix C programming language lineage. Everything here is really about the Unix operating system and the C programming language lineage that swept through the world, forever changing it, like a DNA reprogramming RNA virus. You think I'm kidding? Nope. Just Google the Unix Haters Handbook. Unix Haters Handbook. You should read that. I'm not the first one to make the observation, or I'm not even thinking of it. In fact, this is all about credit where credit is due. I'm going to come off like I know more than you do. I don't. This is my sports. This is my music. This is my pastime. I am interested in stuff like this, like people who know the statistics and the coach decisions and all this stuff about sports. I like tune out and I go, don't you see how interesting real life is? So, can you imagine such hate for a thing that a hater's handbook is published and is successful? Much of it was written for a time when proprietary operating systems were providing a sort of polish that free and open software could not yet provide. In fact, it wasn't even clear yet that Unix was free and open source software. It was bogged down by intellectual property battles. The only fact that was true was that Unix was a fact of life, significant enough that people had to write a hater's handbook. There had to be acceptance of Unix, whether you liked it or not, enough to publish a book about those who hated it. and how to cope and contend with that fact. All right, so that was 1994 when it was first published. And that seems recent for an operating system that was developed 30 years prior in 1970. The virus took 34 years to spread so effectively that cartoon drawing Luddites felt so compelled as to speak out against it. If it was already too late by that time, and then Apple, under the advice of Stephen Wolfram of Wolfram Alpha, finally jumped onto the bandwagon and ported Mac OS 9 to Mac OS X, which is Unix, 13 years later, in the year 2007. And now Microsoft, this year, you can't count last year, and you can't count Windows 10 for many reasons I show in my prior videos. Windows 10, it's very hard to get WSL running properly. Only now, only as of the prior few months, has Microsoft properly jumped onto the Nix bandwagon. 2022, an additional 15 years after Apple, 27 years after the Unix Haters Handbook, and 51 or 52, but I'm going with 51 because that's how old I am, 51 years after the invention of Unix itself. Can you imagine how behind you are today if you're not on the Nix operating systems? Yes, people. We're talking literacy, not computer literacy, not technology literacy, just plain literacy. Refer back above to books and cars. And no, I am not a pathological narcissist trying to set myself above and apart from everyone else by this. And by having spirituality, by finding meaning in the fact that I was born the same year as Unix, 50 miles away, and got sucked into Unix, because that Unix that was born 50 miles away was on these PDP-11 refrigerator-sized boxes. What role did that have in the life of a newborn infant, in Pompton Plains, Parsippany, New Jersey? This was in Murray Hill, where Unix was invented. I was about 50 miles away in Pompton Plains, New Jersey, Parsippany. And so what chance did a kid like that, born under the same star as Unix, have of getting sucked into an operating system made for refrigerator-sized, non-graphics boxes? Well, it was because Commodore Amiga was 50 miles away in the other direction in West Chester, Pennsylvania. And during those magical 80s, the time of E.T. and Star Wars and Dungeons and Dragons and the golden age, the silver age of comics. I miss the golden age, but the silver age of comic books, I was at my most impressionable to such things. So I fell for the Amiga computer, which came up through the Atari 2600, same engineer, which was in my house in the 70s. So the Atari 2600 was not a Unix-like computer by any stretch of the imagination, but the Amiga computer was, and that's what I got onto. And I learned all these things like the data piping and stuff from this guy here. His concepts reached me through the Amiga computer. I did not know it. I had no idea. Again, I have to thank specifically Tony Antonuccio, to a lesser degree a guy named Jerry Hedden, another New Jersey guy. Tony Antonuccio's Northeast Philly. So many stories. So I don't think, I know that much more than anyone else. I don't think I'm smarter than anyone else. I actually think I'm quite a bit slow on the uptake. It takes me a long time to learn things. But I do believe in providence, and I do believe in serendipity, and I do believe in happenstance messengers having the responsibility to deliver a message while staying humble. I'm the baker of goods. I'm not the baker of I am not the maker of baking goods. Those are those wizards I enumerated above. These are the wizards. The makers of tools. You want an analogy? Who makes samurai swords? The makers of tools. I mean, it's not showing the people, but somewhere there's someone who's hammering and folding and hammering and folding, who is doing manufacturing at the nano scale. I kid you not. That line, this ripply line, it's a 1 atom thick division between the upper layer here and the lower layer there. And that progressive stepping of those 1 atom layers of folded steel alloy is what makes a samurai sword so sharp, which is the result of, ageless refinement of making tools. All the work of these folks is the ageless refinement of making tools. And we are privileged these days to be able to pick up such implements and be able to use them as easily as we do. That's what I'm saying. We're privileged. It took me 40 years to get to this place. Where was I 40 years ago? I'm 51. Where was I in my summer when I was 11 years old, turning 12? Well, I was again about 50 miles away from where I am right now. And I have moved a lot. I lived in Virginia. I lived in New York City. So I've moved. I've been around. But right now, I'm back 50 miles away from Camp Watonka near Lake Wallenpaupack. I believe the largest human-made lake in the United States. And it's the result of the 2020 pandemic. So when I was 11 years old at this computer science camp, I rejected computer science-y things. In favor of what? In favor of hand magic. There were a bunch of magicians from England who were the camp counselors here. Not just Mike Silver, who I mentioned before, but another gentleman whose name I forget. But they were from England, and they came over to be camp counselors at this science camp. And I really latched on to the hand magic that they were teaching. And I rejected the computer science because it was about adding binary numbers and shifting binary numbers. And I just could not care less. I was also drawn to Dungeons and Dragons, playing with my co-campers, which led me to Anti-Hero Story of Thomas Covenant, white gold on my ring right now, my wedding ring right now. That is a result of Camp Watonka. And this camper, whose name I forget, but his Dungeons and Dragons campaigns were based on the world of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever. So I later became a sci-fi reader. I kind of missed Asimov, even though my dad was trying to dispose me towards Asimov. I ended up reading Richard R. Donaldson. It was a regret for a while in life, but now I've come to realize why Richard R. Donaldson, Stephen Donaldson. I guess we got to show it. Lord Fowl's Bane. And go to images. It's a striking cover. Stephen R. Donaldson. So I guess there was a reason I ended up reading Stephen R. Donaldson's books before I started reading things like Asimov's Foundation. That in later years I had regrets that I did not read the Foundation before I read this stuff. Because after this I went, of course, to J.R. Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Rings, because, one leads to the other very naturally. And I was on a fantasy path more than a sci-fi path. I got into comic books at this time, and of course art and magic go together. So after going to New York and other places, I was kind of forced to come back home, at least for a little while, right? And now I've got a new perspective on things. I finally see that hand magic is Unix Linux terminal. Opened full screen 24/7, like I do here. That's kind of my message to people. The spiritual feeding of being able to do the magic tricks and the performance art for people. You do it for yourself just as much, and you do it for your self-betterment, right? Writing, spontaneous creative expression through writing. Green Arrow energy forces. Dungeons and Dragons, sci-fi, and comics are Python, Vim, and Git. And the thrill of performance of magic is the spontaneous mastery over these above tools. I am a deeply flawed individual. I wasted much of my youth on things that could have made me Bill Gates and Elon Musk and Andy Rubin 1,000 times over. But am I sorry? Well, a little bit, sure. But we're all human. We covet heroes. Do we not? Does that make us pathological? Does it make us non-functional? Does it make us a danger to ourselves and others? And be careful what you blame people of. There's a difference between being on the scale of something and being non-functional because you're at an extreme end of it. I think it's one of the favorite sports of people somewhere on that scale to accuse other people they see on that same scale of that thing because projection, of course. We're all born narcissists because infants get fed by, oh, wow. The difference is that as you grow up, you start to take control of your own life. And just because you have a little bit of, an admiration for the ability to control your life doesn't mean you're a control freak. But people who can't control their own lives and covet your ability to control your own life will very likely call you a control freak. That's just the way life is. So what is it that makes us the way we are? Is it circumstance? Or is the choice really ours? Well, it starts out one and then it becomes the other. I love magic. I love consuming fantasy media. And this is almost done, but this is my morning thought process. It took me much less time to write it initially than just zipping through than it's taking me to read it to you now. In fact, it's time check time. 7:53. It's still very early in the day and quite a bit before the workday starts. So this is really good. I love this. I love creating visions of a world that could be. I love mastering tools. Tools of the means of production, today's magic. Linux, Python, Vim, and Git. I think that the best way to learn is to teach, and so I teach. I love to teach, and I've got a mic. I'm just not using it. I've got a mic, but I'm not using it. Maybe I'll use the mic. I'm going back and forth on that. There's a mic in here, so it's still valid. I love the mic. I love to teach, and I've got a mic. I love to talk into the mic. I'm Mike Levin. So let's begin. Begin my day, right? So that's where I ended and decided, hey, this has got to be a live cast. There we go. Done. So if anyone's there and wants to chime in, please do. If you're not, that's fine. And, all good either way. This is just, instead of recording it, really, I used to record this stuff with Camtasia, right? If we look behind this, is my icon for doing it without interaction. And one of my new realizations is that there's interested people. Even if no one says anything now, that does not devalue it at all. It's just, we're all human, right? We can't help but look. I know someone's there. Even if you just say hi, I'd appreciate it. If not, I'm not going to pressure anyone into it either, because, that makes me guilty of the demand for that feedback loop, which is similar to the crying baby, right? The narcissism. I back off. I become self-aware of the issues, and I smile to myself. knowing I'm going to be more effective today because of this. And effective at what? I guess that's where I'll finish up, because I have to improve my work performance based on all my recent revelations. And really what that's going to be is going from, and I'll probably do this on the other laptop because I want to do this under Windows 11 in a very generic way. So it's going from the WSL install command that I keep telling you about to LXC/LXD being installed, which is a container tech like Docker, but better, but standard. Let's just call it but standard. It's what's built in, but Linux standard, but the Linux standard. Docker is not the Linux standard. And then from that to systemd Linux daemons. I have such terrible words for this. What does any of this mean? Well, it means scheduling. And also to data pipelining. To pipeline, L-I-N-E, so it must be I-N-G. To data pipelining, Huey. I'll be using something called Huey, Python Huey. To stay compatible with the new guy's work. All right, so there's a hotshot that was hired at work. I love him to death. But he knows stuff that I don't know, and he does stuff that I don't know. And my work is fairly challenging to blend into his work. It's been weeks. It's been weeks that I've been struggling with this issue. And I now realize I need a pure Linux playground. That usually means VMs, but today means containers. These should be bullet points because these are such important points. And this is where I'll wrap up. This clarifies my work for today. I need a pure Linux playground. That usually means VMs, but today means containers. And today means Linux on Windows subsystem for Linux, parentheses WSL. So there's other stories here. This is going to be leading us to the story of, I think I mentioned in a prior video how Solaris is a Unix variant better than most Unix and Linux. It's Sun Microsystems, who does everything better than everyone else, including disk file formats, disk formats. And LXD uses Solaris's disk format for containers for many reasons that are just so totally interesting. Wow. Microsystems. And I'll just give you its name. It's very hard for me to remember, but it's easy to Google up. Did I miss anything here? Let's close tabs as we go. Make sure I didn't forget to tell you anything. No, I think I covered everything. It's good stuff, man. Good stuff. Oh, good stuff. All right, the last thing to Google. is Solaris file system. ZFS. ZFS is what we're going to be installing in order to take this step that has been so hard for me to take to become compatible with the work of this other guy. It seems like it should just be porting a script. I got a bunch of scripts, very intense, complicated scripts. I do some things that other people would be quite challenged. Now, as not building myself up, it took me a long time to get here. I did it like 5 other ways that didn't work so well. But finally, when I got to my 6th way, it's like, bam, I got it. It meets all the criteria. I hit all the points. And now that has to be lifted up and moved into another environment where I'm frankly going to lose a lot of control over it. So I need to maintain enough control to do the types of work, the updates, the adding and removing things from it that I need to do, and for it to not break, and for all this other stuff. So a chain of little dependencies I don't expect pop up, starting with, oh, I need another local pure Linux playground. It can't be this instance of Windows Subsystem for Linux, right? I opened this one here, and this particular version that I'm running in its own chroot, there's terminology for this that precedes the containers that came before it, predates. All this container tech came from a command called chroot, and I was using it before. It's not even here on this because it's so unused anymore. But today's container technology is basically doing the same trick as old schoolers were doing with the chroot command. So I realize I need to use the modern version of chroot, which is LXD, to make little playgrounds on my underneath. It's a ziggurat, all right? So once more, finally, last thing, this I promise, right? I always have Art Rage there ready to show stuff. And what color? Green. I'll use this bright emerald green in honor of Thomas Covenant. This green was always used for the ill earth stone, a bane. So there's the OS level, and we're going to say Linux. Now, you know what? I'll start right from the bottom. There's the hardware. And on top of the hardware, you got the OS, which these days now, because of the Windows subsystem for Linux, it can be Linux side by side with Windows, you see. Neither is actually above the other in the new ziggurat. Now, you would think I would do my experimental work over here. It would seem like a valid place to do, experimental work, to play. Well, it's not. It's not really. What you want to do is to create another thing here, which instead of going smaller because it's like a subset or less valid, you can create these containers that are every bit as valid. In fact, they almost shouldn't be written there because this would imply a virtual machine, right? Traditionally, you would do this with some sort of virtual machine here. It might be the Java runtime engine. It might be all the tricks that the C language and BCPL that came before it used to create a subset computer. It's a subset computer. So it's not even any of that. What containers are is they live right next to this. In fact, I'm going to draw it big enough to put LXD. And you can have multiples of these. LXD. And what these are the playgrounds. These are the playgrounds. 80-20 rule, remember? Oh, you can say hi to Uri. Say hi to Uri. bonus. See all these bonuses at the end of the video? See what you get if you watch this to the end? You get kitties. All right, so I think you got the idea, and I think I talked your ears off. I feel sorry for anyone who actually watched this beginning to end. So, but I also, you know, if you're young and you're starting out on these journeys and you're interested in this stuff, I also feel like, you know, I feel like I believe my mailman must have felt when he taught me the removable finger trick. I feel like what I imagine my Camp Watonka camp counselors felt like when they taught me the French drop, which I'll be teaching you very shortly. And they also taught me this, which I'll work towards. You want to make cards disappear? There. I'm not very good at it, but I'll be bringing you more hand magic. Not from Winona Lakes, I'm afraid to say, but instead from Staten Island over the coming weeks, months, and hopefully years. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon. And do not forget to subscribe.